see.
Yeah. See what it comes off as.
So you're live, dude. You're live.
Wow. Mine's state of the art.
That is pretty tight. Where'd you get that thing?
Office Max, dude. It's like a little podcast, tight. Boy.
Yeah, stop
what,
that.
Is something funny about this?
There's nothing funny about that,
dude. Ever since Roni, you've had a bad attitude,
dude. Most entertainment success stories follow the same pattern. Someone struggles with a small group of friends, finally gets discovered, and then enters a completely different world. The budgets become bigger. The rooms become cleaner. The old collaborators slowly disappear, replaced by people the industry considers safer, sharper, or more professional. Shane Gillis took a different route. When his comedy moved from Philadelphia clubs and YouTube sketches to Netflix, many of the people around him did not change. John McKeever was still behind the camera. Steve Gerben was no longer just an early collaborator. He became the center of a Netflix sitcom. Chris O'Connor and Kayla Fox were still part of the ensemble. The style became more polished, but the chemistry still felt like it came from the same room. That matters because Shane's rise is usually described as a comeback story.
Talk about overlap. Fucking tall, jacked, Christian genius.
Oh, okay.
He was hired by Saturday Night Live in 2019, removed from the cast days later, rebuilt his career independently, and eventually returned to host the show. But that version leaves out the more interesting achievement. Shane began performing stand-up around 2012. By 2016, he had won Helium Comedy Club's Philly's Funniest competition and had started Matt and Shane's Secret podcast with Matt McCusker. Those details matter because Shane's comedy was not developed inside a television writer's room. It grew through clubs, podcasts, small productions, and constant interaction with other Philadelphia comedians. That environment shaped more than his material. It shaped his rhythm. Shane's comedy often depends on familiarity. The pause before an insult, the reaction from someone who knows exactly what he means, and the feeling that the argument began long before the camera started recording. That kind of timing cannot be manufactured quickly. It develops when performers spend years learning how the other person thinks. John McKeever became one of the most important creative partners in that world. McKeever understood how to translate Shane's loose, conversational humor into visual comedy without making it feel overproduced. Steve Gerben brought a completely different energy. Nervous, precise, and painfully believable. Chris O'Connor, Kyla Fox, Tommy Pope, and other comedians from the same orbit added personalities that felt less like interchangeable cast members and more like people who already knew the rules of the group. This is the first reason Shane's later projects work. The people around him were not selected after he became famous. Many of them helped create the language that made him famous, and no one demonstrates that better than Steve Gerben. Gerben does not compete with Shane by trying to become louder. His strength is resistance. Shane pushes, Gerben tightens up. Shane creates chaos. Gerben reacts like a man who has already calculated every possible consequence, and still cannot stop it. Their chemistry works because the contrast feels natural, rather than assigned. In September 2019, Saturday Night Live announced Shane as a new featured cast member. Within days, old podcast clips containing offensive language resurfaced.
My agent, did you say the word?
And I was like, no. I wouldn't say that. I was like, no, I don't.
And he was removed before appearing on the show.
Are you kidding me?
That moment could have reduced his career to one public controversy. Instead, it clarified the route available to him. The traditional gate had closed, but Shane still had direct access to an audience through podcasts, stand-up, and YouTube. More importantly, he still had collaborators who understood what kind of comedy he was trying to make. The earliest version of Tires already existed in this period. A low-budget pilot was uploaded to Shane's YouTube channel in 2019. Years before Netflix released the finished series, the idea was not created after a streaming company decided Shane was valuable.
Oh, you motherfuckers. Okay.
All right.
The characters, setting, and creative partnership were already being tested, while the group was still operating outside the mainstream. That changes the meaning of the Netflix deal. Tires was not Hollywood handing Shane a random sitcom. It was an independent idea surviving long enough for the industry to catch up with it. And that became the model for what followed. Create the work first, prove the audience exists, and negotiate from evidence instead of permission. During the pandemic, Shane and John McKeever used their own funds to film a collection of sketches. The project became Gilly and Keeves. On paper, the sketches were small. There was no giant network launch and no familiar franchise carrying the audience. But the limitations became part of the identity. The locations felt real. The characters were strangely specific. The performances did not stop to explain why something was funny. Most importantly, everyone committed to the world as if the ridiculous situation were completely normal. That is the central mechanism behind many of the best Gilly and Keeves sketches. Absurd behavior presented with realistic conviction. A private militia is treated like a responsible business plan. A daycare becomes a place for adult incompetence and misplaced authority. A customer service call turns into an interrogation. The premise may be exaggerated, but the acting remains grounded enough to make the situation recognizable. McKeever's direction is essential to that balance. He knows when to hold on an uncomfortable reaction and when to cut before a character becomes too self-aware. Shane supplies the confidence and aggression, but the camera frequently reveals the damage through everyone around him. The ensemble matters too. Kyla Fox, Chris O'Connor, Steve Gerben, and other recurring collaborators do not feel like decorations around the star. Their reactions create the social reality that allows Shane's characters to become absurd. If every performer tried to match his energy, the scenes would collapse into noise. Gilly and Keeves therefore proved two things at the same time. It proved that Shane could attract a large audience without a traditional television platform. And it proved that his collaborators were not simply old friends being carried along. They were functional parts of the comedy itself. The group had developed a repeatable creative system, familiar performers, clearly defined character contrasts, grounded locations, and total commitment to bad ideas. That system would eventually become television ready without losing its original voice. In 2021, Shane released Live in Austin directly on YouTube.
Like this tweet.
John McKeever directed it. The decision was important. Instead of waiting for a major platform to certify him as a successful stand-up, Shane placed the full special where anyone could watch it. The audience could judge the work without a network acting as the middleman. The special gave Shane something more valuable than a comeback headline. It gave him proof. Viewers could see that his act was not built only on controversy. His strongest material had structure, long setups, controlled misdirection, specific impressions, and the ability to approach a dangerous subject while keeping himself inside the joke. 2 years later, Beautiful Dogs arrived on Netflix. McKeever directed that special too. That continuity is easy to overlook. The production scale changed, and the distributor changed, but Shane did not treat mainstream acceptance as a reason to replace the person who had already helped shape his visual presentation. By 2024, he was back on the Saturday Night Live stage, this time as host. It was the cleanest possible symbol of his return to mainstream comedy. But the deeper victory was happening somewhere else. Returning to SNL proved that Shane had become too successful to ignore. Building Tires with the same core collaborators proved that he had gained enough leverage to choose what that success would look like. The first Netflix season of Tires was a 6-episode production financed independently before Netflix acquired it for release in May 2024. Its official creators were Shane Gillis, Steve Gerben, and John McKeever. McKeever directed. Gerben played Will, the anxious manager trying to rescue a struggling auto shop. Chris O'Connor played Cal. Kyla Fox played Kyla.
Will, you look like a pedophile.
Shane played the disruptive cousin who keeps making Will's life harder.
Freeze, fuckers! What are you two fucking weirdos doing in here? You sucking my little girl?
Shane!
Look closely at that structure. Shane had become the most famous person in the group, but Tires was not designed as a show where every character existed to praise him. The story is largely built around Will's pressure, Will's insecurity, and Will's attempts to control a business that keeps slipping away from him. Shane's character is often the force that destabilizes Will's world, but Gerben is allowed to carry the emotional and narrative tension. That choice tells us more than a speech about loyalty ever could. If Shane only wanted to reward a friend, he could have given Gerben a cameo. Instead, Gerben became a co-creator and the character whose problems give the series its structure. The same principle applies to McKeever. He is not presented as the famous comedian's friend who is allowed onto the set. He is a co-creator, writer, executive producer, and director whose visual instincts connect Tires to the group's earlier work. And the supporting cast preserves the same chemistry. O'Connor's relaxed presence, Fox's blunt reactions, and the larger ensemble make the shop feel occupied by people with their own rhythms, not background performers waiting for Shane to deliver a punchline. Netflix expanded the scale and later added recognizable actors and comedians, but the foundation remained the work of Gillis, Gerben, McKeever, and a cast tied to the creative world they had already built. This is why calling the story an act of friendship is true, but incomplete. Keeping the same people was also a creative strategy. Hollywood could provide distribution, resources, and a larger audience. It could not instantly reproduce a decade of trust, conflict, timing, and shared references. Shane's advantage was not only that he was funny, it was that he reached the mainstream with a functioning comedy ecosystem already attached. Shane's story did not. He built another room, filled it with many of the people who were there before the cameras improved, and made that room too successful for the industry to ignore. He did not reach Netflix by leaving his old comedy world behind. He reached Netflix by showing that the old world was ready for a bigger screen,